close?
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, we were okay to start.
I think we're okay to start. Can everybody be heard? Everybody's online. I want to welcome everybody. I think we're going to have some community members joining us. At some point, I want to welcome the Windermere folks. Before we get started, as you know, the governor says we can do this remotely, and it's going to be recorded. And I think you all know that routine, and the way we generally work is, my name is Jean-Daniel Nolan. I'm chair of the Hell's Kitchen Clinton Land Use Committee of Manhattan Community Board 4. We have committee members here. We'll have a presentation. The committee members will weigh in, and then the members of the community who may be calling in will also weigh in, and please make comments, ask questions. Welcome, Bob. I see you there. Hey, Sarah. Welcome, Sarah. We have a pretty full component. And there's Bob Benfato. So I think we have almost a full committee here. It's an important meeting tonight. There are about 3 items at least. They're very important. They're about the past of this neighborhood, and they're about the future of this neighborhood. We're going to talk about the Windermere building, which went up 140 years ago in 1881, and it's been beautifully restored on the outside. We're going to find out what's going to happen in the inside. Then we're going to talk about the future, and the future of our district with all the hotels and the commercial spaces. What is going to happen to them? We have a lot of people saying, from the borough president to the mayor to obscure political figures out in Astoria, Queens, telling us what should be done in our district, where we're going to talk about what we think should be done in our district with these hotels. We're going to talk about that tonight. And I know also the Chelsea committee is going to talk about it at another date. And then we'll put all the comments together. And then we're going to talk about the historic district proposals we had for Hell's Kitchen and Patrick's Market down in the 30s, and how we should follow up. We finally heard from the Landmarks Preservation Committee, and we're going to find out how to proceed. So, and I'll try, when we have questions, I'll try to call on you in order. I may fail to do so, so forgive me in advance. So if there are no questions about how to proceed, I'm going to start the meeting now. And before we get into the presentation, we're going to have 2 slides to kind of talk about 2 terms, at least 2 terms we're going to be talking about tonight, so everybody knows what we're talking about. And Janine, if you could put up the first slide. This is Land Use 101. And we're going to be talking about something. This is a periodic glossary. We're going to talk about something called 74711. What the hell is that? Well, it's, I know Richard and your team knows what this is, but just for members of the community, if you don't know, it's in the zoning, in the zoning resolution from New York City. It talks about what happens with a building that's landmarked and you want to do things inside. And so the city planning, I'll just go through it very quickly. City planning can permit modifications of use and bulk, except the floor area ratio. That's very important to notice. So use and bulk, they can do things as long as it preserves, it maintains the building in terms of its preservation, and that the bulk modifications relate harmoniously. Again, this is language from city planning, so it's not clear all the time exactly what it means, but I think we have an idea. The units have to stay the same. So then they can grant a special permit as long as there's minimal adverse effects. And the commission may prescribe further appropriate changes. So that's something we're going to get into tonight with the Windermere. And the second slide, Janine, if you could bring it up, is about something called the cure. And I know Joe knows a lot about this. Let me go quickly, and then Joe has another wonderful slide to talk a little about the history of this. But basically, the cure, if a building owner harasses people and is found out and punished, that owner or new owners of the building have to effect a cure. And that cure is to put in some affordable, low income affordable units in that building. This applies in 3 of our special districts: Clinton Special District, Hudson Yards Special District, and Garment Special District. It also applies, I think, somewhere out in Williamsburg, I think, but mainly we're concerned here. And how it has to be applied is specific to us and to Clinton. And 28%, you see at the bottom, 28% of the total residential floor area, and 20% of the total floor area. So those are 2 different considerations. We're going to get into that tonight. So that's called the cure or the Clinton cure. And Joe, we've been through this before, have we not? Janine, we have another slide coming up. Yeah. Joe, take it away.
So let's talk a little bit about the cure and why it exists.
Joe,
also,
you're on mute, Joe.
What? No, I'm not.
He's not on mute. It's your volume.
Are you on mute, Joe?
No, he's not. I hear Joe.
We hear you, Joe.
Okay. Everyone's hearing Joe except for JD?
Yeah, which is probably a problem since he's the chair.
JD, you're on mute now.
I am.
Now, can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So,
Okay.
the harassment, certification of harassment and the cure for harassment also applies in the West Chelsea Special Zoning District. So in our community board district, we have 4 special zoning districts where this applies. It has been extended to parts of the city. But I want to note for everybody that the issue of certification of harassment dates back to 1973 and 74, and the district was first adopted. And the cure exists for a particular reason. No one ever thought there would need to be a cure. The certification seemed to be enough. However, certain building owners actually were found to have harassed, and the text at that point said you could not get a building permit. That pretty much just froze the building in place. 2 owners, one on 51st Street and another one on 48th Street, sued over the cure, and the city over that provision, and the city put together a cure for harassment. The city first proposed a 20% cure. The community wanted a 35% cure, and we settled on a 28% cure. It's been a living, breathing document, and over the period of time, it now reads 28% of the floor area, residential floor area or hotel area of a building, or 20% of an entire development site. That change happened in 2005 with Hudson Yards, because the concern is a developer could harass people out of a building on a large development site and just have a penalty of 28% of the floor area of one building, but it can be a much larger site. So it reads 28% of the floor area of the building to be demolished or altered, or 20% of the entire development site, whichever is greater. It has not been used much because it only comes into play in extreme situations where there is an actual legal finding of harassment. It's been invoked at 500 West 42nd Street, 525 West 45th Street, 301 West 46th Street, 300 West 46th, 793 9th Avenue, and those cures were actually done, producing a total of 59 cure units and buildings that were renovated in various different ways. That's the chart in front of you. Tonight we have the Windermere in front of us, which has been pending for a long time, with 20 units. There's another building at 565 West 53rd that Housing Committee has taken up a number of times with 23 units. And 307 West 43rd was a cure element, but a different provision, which produced 9 units when a large development site was changed and the Intercontinental Hotel was built on West 44th Street. So that gives us our universe of the cure. There are only a few more buildings, such as 361 West 47th Street, that have a finding of harassment. And most owners now are out of their way not to go to the levels of harassment that the prior owners of the Windermere did, not the current owners at all, where tenants were violently harassed. And in fact, as everyone should know, who has not been on the committee a long time, the owners of the Windermere, the owners the husband and wife and the managing agent were actually they were convicted of criminal harassment and they were jailed. That's a unique circumstance in this case. So that gives you the broad picture as to what this cure is. A very serious penalty. Those units are affordable as per regulatory agreement in perpetuity. The owner loses the benefit of the market rate use of those units.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for that. Thank you for that slide. Janine, thank you for showing those slides. Janine Prudenti is our community associate. She runs the meeting. If anybody misbehaves, she will mute you for the rest of the meeting. She's very tough. Anyway, Joe, thank you so much. We're going to start now into the conversation. I think Bob Benfato, you were running the board back when Windermere came before us before. What was proposed in the past for the interior of the building?
There's about a handful of letters we wrote over the last 10 plus years back when I was DM about the building. Most of it was concerning the outside, which says we've dealt with already, but there was concern on the inside about there being a 9th floor on extension to a rooftop that the community had big concerns about at the time. There was concerns about, it was understood that elevators would need to go into the building. It was built in 1881, but there was concern about the mechanicals of the elevators being on top of the building, especially if you added a rooftop, because then the mechanical would have to be on top of the rooftop in order for the elevator to open up. And there was concern at the last time someone came with a housing plan, it was a Met Council, it was going to be for senior housing. And the concern was that since the people who are harassed were all sorts of ages, that it should be open to all sorts of ages for families and people to move in. And we wanted low-income people. We wanted a separate entrance from any commercial or hotel. The board wanted 20% to be at least 2 bedrooms. If there was to be an event space, we wanted some way that the residents would be soundproofed from the event space. And we wanted a nonprofit administering agent to run it, not just the person who owned the building. And that's about where we left it.
Bob, thank you so much. So we've had an introduction, and I think we're all on board to know where we're going. Richard, Albert, I throw it up to whoever wants to lead off, introduce your team, and take it away.
I just want to say one thing, guys. I'm on as well. This is Mark Terrace. I'm the ownership, and I'm on the phone.
Welcome.
I wanted to say hi to everybody. Thank you.
Welcome, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, JD, and for that introduction. And thank you for having us this evening. I'm Jim Power from Kramer Levin. I'm joined by Mark Tress. I think he's actually on I had forwarded him my invitation, so his name may be showing up my name may be showing up on his screen. So Mark Tress and Albert Fax from the development team, Nick Chelko from MA Architects, and Richard Barth and Ashley Thompson from Capilino. This application concerns the Windermere. Janine, if you could move the slide ahead, please. The Windermere, as noted, a previously existing landmark building at the southwest corner of 57th Street and 9th Avenue. This application seeks a 74-711 special permit to modify a series of regulations to allow the conversion and enlargement of the building for commercial use. As noted, the site has a long history and it's been in front of the Community Board for several times over the years, most recently in December when the board unanimously supported a scope of restoration work for the building, storefront restoration work. I will take you through some of the history. If I could have the next slide, please. So our client, Windermere Properties LLC, acquired the property in 2009. The building was badly in disrepair. There was an extensive restoration program done pursuant to a series of approvals by the Landmarks Commission. As noted, there was an unfortunate history of harassment by the prior owner of the building, which led to a cure agreement with HPD, which was signed and recorded in 2012. Next slide, please. Under that agreement, 20 affordable apartments will be provided in the converted building with a separate entrance on 57th Street. As shown on this slide, The affordable meets all of the cure requirements applicable in the preservation area, including those related to square footage and unit count. There are actually the two percentages, 28 that are applicable here, 28% of the pre-existing building and 20% of the building as it may be enlarged. In both cases, the proposed 18,742 square feet exceeds the required square footage. The units would be affordable at rents not to exceed 80% of AMI, and we anticipate that they would be administered as senior affordable housing by the Met Council on Jewish Poverty. Getting back to this application, actually the prior slide, Janine. Through the special permit, the building would be converted for either transient hotel or office use. The application proposes two alternate schemes. Both of those schemes would have ground floor retail and restaurant use on the top floor. The restaurant on the top floor would have an outdoor component. We would be back in front of Board 4 in the future in connection with the liquor license for that establishment, and we anticipate that we would comply with all of Board 4's guidelines for outdoor use of that space. The 74-711 special permit seeks a series of use and bulk waivers, which Nick will take you through in more detail. As noted, the special permit is subject to findings that the Landmark Commission has approved a restoration program and a continuing maintenance program for the landmark, which Landmarks has done here, that the bulk modifications relate harmoniously to the landmark, and that the modifications have a minimal adverse effect on the surrounding area, and our application addresses those findings. With that, I will turn it over to Nick to review the particulars of the restoration and alteration, and then we can respond to any questions that you have.
Thanks, Jim, and hi, everyone. Nick Chelko from Morris Hatchme Architects. We go to the next slide and the next one. Thanks, Jim. Just to review the project and its proposal, the building itself, we just want to take some time to go over its history. It's an important landmark, an individual landmark designated in 2005, but built in 1880. Oldest known large apartment complex, certainly in Council District 3, but it's suggested that it's the second oldest in New York City. So important in that regard as well. The project, as proposed, 80,000 square feet of adaptive reuse from its former use as a mixed residential apartment and SRO to commercial hotels or office. We'll go over that, and the residential units. The 20 affordable apartments per the CURE agreement that Jim reviewed is a part of this, and we'll show you exactly where in the building that is. The remaining area of the building, 62,000 square feet approximately, is for ground floor retail, office above, or hotel use. As a hotel proposal, it's approximately, we did actually an environmental study at approximately 200 guest rooms, but we're proposing 174. So as I said, active ground floor retail is a big part of this to get that corner alive again, and the new barrier-free access is important as well for all uses, residential and for the commercial use. And then, as you'll see, we'll detail the vertical addition to the rooftop that was part of the earlier LPC review of this project. Next slide, please. And this is just looking back on the left from 1917, a photo from 1917. The photo on the right, 1940s, you can already see a deterioration of the porticos on West 57th Street that we're proposing to restore. But really that image on the left from 1917, where you see the elevated tracks above 9th Avenue, that was our best image of reference for what is now a missing double portico on the corner. And then the details of the portico that's beyond that remain, but are missing some details. Also the cornice on the corner and the projecting wooden storefront. This photograph was critical for us in our effort to restore the building to match the historic condition as we could understand it and as it was evident in the existing building or in these photographs. Next slide. And when current ownership took over the building, this was the state of the exterior facade of the building across its many levels. I think we all remember that. We can go to the next slide. As you know, over the past many years, it's gone through restoration, as Jim noted. That work has been approved by LPC and has gone on throughout the past, let's say, past 8 years. What that has been is replacing the existing combustible wood floor. It was noted in the very beginning that the structure was sound, but that the wood floor could be replaced to prolong the life of the building. So that flooring was replaced with steel and concrete, so non-combustible, but also the structural integrity was restored. And that's inside the building, right? Repairing the load-bearing masonry foundations was an important part. And then what we all saw from the street was the cleaning and repair of brick and stone masonry facade elements to match the historic condition. So that was cleaning and repointing the grout, the mortar, excuse me, replacing windows to match historic profiles. And then what you'll see soon is the new wood storefront, the new double portico to match that photo that we just looked at. Repair the existing porticos with all their detail, their original detail, and to replace the cornice and ironwork at the areaway on the sidewalk level to match historic conditions. Go to the next slide. These proposals are probably best seen here, where the image on the left is the building as it was at the start of the project, and on the right is the proposed image of the building with these restoration measures. So you can see on the ground floor, the restored portico, the detailed, the restored double portico, the storefront on the corner, and then the restored details of the two existing porticos. Next slide for 9th Avenue. So that's the restored storefront, and you actually saw an update of this design based on new found conditions that existed prior to the approval that you see in front of you. And then also above, you can see this is set back quite a bit, but you can see the profile of the 9th floor addition. It's probably best seen on the next slide. So the image on the left is the existing condition if you were to go see the rooftop today, and the proposed condition on the right. So the green portion is an existing 9th floor piece, or excuse me, existing 8th floor portion, and then the yellow portion is an 8th floor infill. So that's technically an enlargement, but that 8th floor infill, the yellow piece, is behind the existing parapet. So the parapet is very high, and you don't see that as it's entirely behind the parapet. So it's the 9th floor addition that really visually constitutes an addition, and that's in orange. And you can see there was an effort working closely with landmarks and with mock-ups, which we'll show you, to minimize the visibility of the 9th floor addition above the landmark structure, especially above its primary facades, the 9th Avenue and West 57th Street facade. So those portions are set back. If you go to the next slide, you'll see from certain vantage points on the corner, you don't see the enlargement, and that was really the goal. But as we step back on the next slide along West 57th Street, you start to see the enlargement, and these are going to be rendered as bulkhead, typical bulkhead roof outcroppings in a metal that you typically see on
you're pointing to the orange,
roof creations. Yeah. So on these images, so on the left is, you can see the mock-up, and we just we put some dashed red line over the mock-up to increase its visibility, but that's a photo of a mock-up on the roof. And then on the right, we have keyed that into the orange as the 9th floor addition, as a diagram with the massing on the right. And these were all part of the LPC presentation. And the next slide, you'll see from 9th Avenue looking north. And so this is seen over a secondary facade. But you can see that ninth floor addition, that actually was originally proposed to be coplanar with that facade, but that's actually set back as well. Hard to tell depth in this, but it is set back. And there's a small, it's a light blue on the corner, but there's a small parapet extension on the corner there that you can see. Okay, so to talk about the uses, the next slide, the proposed uses of the building. So we said active ground floor retail, and on the ground floor, the upper floor, the top floor, the 9th floor we were talking about would be a restaurant in both the hotel and office proposals. And that actually differs from what we had in the approved or the certified DCP 74711 application, but we're working with DCP to correct that and clarify. So restaurant on top for both proposals, but we're carrying 2 proposals, or two which are distinguished by 2 different uses. The one being a hotel, and the other being a commercial office. I actually should go back. I'm sorry, I should go back to slide 11. I want to point out the residential use and the residential portion. So on the proposed axonometric on the right, the residential portion is highlighted with a pink outline. And there's vertical separation of 1 story between the restaurant on top and the residential portion. The residential portion will have its own entrance as separate from a commercial entrance. It will have its own lobby, its own circulation. So there's no mix between the residential and commercial uses. And the residential portion is entirely comprised of the 20 affordable units per the CURE agreement. Okay, so we can go to the proposed zoning waivers on slide 16. We talked about the uses. So to allow commercial uses above the 2nd story. B is to allow the use group 6 restaurant above the 2nd story. The 3rd one here, to allow less than the required amount of open space. So we have a building, and I'm going to point it out in the next slide more clearly, but we have a building that essentially, it was built before zoning existed. And much of the waivers you'll see is related to making an existing non-complying building conform or comply with current zoning. So I'll try to point out that distinction where we've actually have a new condition that is part of the 74711 application, and where we have conditions that are really just a building built in 1880 that has to comply or be brought into compliance with modern zoning. And C is that. So open space requirement for height factor zoning regulations require a building of this height to have more open space than you're seeing in this plan image. So we need a waiver there. D, we can go to the next slide. And waiver D here has to do with the maximum height of 85 feet or 6 stories. And you can see here that the existing portion of the Windermere that's within the hatched area on the floors 7 and 8, item D is pointing to it. that hatched area, that's an existing portion of the building, but it doesn't comply with the setback regulations. So we need a waiver there. If you go to the next slide, this one's a little bit more nuanced, but you can see the 8th floor area in that the 8th floor zone in the hatched area. Now that's dark gray. What does that mean? That's actually proposed enlargement. That's new building behind an existing parapet that's in the hatched area. And then you have the 7th floor below it, which is again in the encroachment. But that lighter gray of the 7th floor is existing. So the proposed 9th floor enlargement is not an encroachment on sky exposure plane here. Item E is to allow windows that do not comply with minimum distance between legally required windows, walls, or lot lines. That's really best seen in the plan, if you wouldn't mind going back up 2 slides. But we have existing courts. In one case, the sort of white rectangle you see in the middle, that's an existing court. And then you have 2 smaller courts to the left of that, to the west. And those again are existing courts with existing windows facing them. And so it's to make those windows with facing non-complying courts legal windows. And lastly, to allow portions of the building as permitted obstructions within the inner court. So it's not just the windows themselves, but it's the courts that do not comply with the size of required courts. So really they're treating existing portion of the buildings as obstructions to those existing inner courts. Next slide, 19, I can clarify a few of these pieces that we've introduced and where they exist on plan. So we want to show you the ground floor plan on the left, where we have the residential entry off of West 57th Street. The accessible entry is from the areaway, and there would be a lift. As you see, it's a portico, so there's steps there. So we've introduced a lift. And the residential lobby, the residential elevator you see is separate from the commercial lobby, which is off of 9th Avenue. So 9th Avenue has retail on the corner and then going south. And then the commercial lobby you see on the southern corner of the building with its own core, 2 elevators to serve the users and 1 for service of the restaurant rooftop above. So we just want to share a little bit about the current status. If you go to the next slide, this is the building as it looks today. So as we said, the structure has been stabilized, and the combustible floor, wood floor, has been replaced with the non-combustible steel and concrete. So this structure is stabilized. The street facades and cornice restoration is complete. So that's all the masonry, stone, windows, and the cornice work. Multi-story scaffolding is removed. All exterior brick cleaned, repointed. And so we just want to point out that you can see on the street, it's all cleaned up, but every brick on every facade as you go around the building has been cleaned and every mortar joint repointed. The portico, storefront, and areaway restoration is in progress. Those construction documents have been submitted to LPC and approved. We're in shop drawings, so that stuff's moving ahead. And we're here today before you for the 74-711 application portion. So that's our current status. That's the building as it is today, and that's our proposal.
Nick, James, thank you so much for that. What a fantastically restored building. I'm sure there will be questions, and then we'll get back to the zoning waivers and take them one by one. But if you don't mind, I'm going to open it up to the committee to comment. And Janine, if we could, let's go back so I can see who would like to comment. Anybody?
We have Dale and James.
I'm sorry, Janine?
Dale and James Wallace.
Great. Dale.
Thanks, JD. Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. I have to say, I'm really impressed with how, you know, the apparent stewardship of this building and this landmark building. And I just have a few questions, points of clarification mainly. So when discussing the residential units, it's evident that there is a separate residential entrance on 57th Street. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
And which I think is a better option than the avenue. And as the diagram pointed out, it seems that no residential units will have the restaurant terrace function directly overhead.
That's correct.
And then can you, it's really hard to read the plans on Zoom. Can you compare the smaller dimension of the courtyard versus the zoning requirement for window distance, which I think in this instance would be 30 feet, is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's probably best seen on slide 19. If you wanted to pull those up again.
Read the dimensions if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, yeah. So the large court is approximately 32 feet in its largest dimension and 23 feet in its smallest dimension. That's the large court in the center. And
Right.
that should be, that should be 30 feet as the minimum dimension.
So, so the waiver essentially asks for leniency on 23 feet versus 30 feet, which is still
Yeah, well, we do have a smaller court. We have a smaller court that really it's 5.6 feet by 10.4 feet, and these were the kinds of courts that you would see in these old buildings. We're using that court primarily for secondary bedrooms and for kitchen light.
Mm-hmm.
There would still be living rooms, and this is shown on the slides on 19, the typical upper floor plan, if you want to take another look at it.
Sure.
But the living space would always have either light off of the rear yard, which measures somewhere around 35 feet by 40 feet, or the street.
Okay.
So living spaces always get street or rear yard facing, and then secondary bedrooms have these court facing windows.
Right. So that smaller well is essentially an air shaft. And are the residential units on those, or are the hotel rooms on those?
So I was only speaking of the residential units and their bedrooms and living spaces. The hotel the hotel does have windows facing the court. That larger inner court that we were talking about, the 23 by 31.
Okay, but that well serves what will be the residential units for the most part. Okay.
Yeah, the well is only in the residential portion of the building. Okay,
and then quickly, just so I understand the concept, I know there's A and B. When you were talking about as a hotel operation, you were talking about 174 keys?
Yes.
And I mean, just out of curiosity, like, is this like a luxury boutique operation or like a moderately priced boutique operation as envisioned as a hotel?
Perhaps Albert could respond to that in terms of the intended.
Yeah, I'd say it's more on the moderate side than the high-end side.
I mean, yeah, there's certainly a lot of hotels in the area. And then you don't have floor plans of the residential units as yet, is that right?
Oh, we do actually, yes. And I should also mention that those floor plans were reviewed and approved by HPD in connection with the cure agreement.
All right, great. Thank you for the presentation.
Yes. James Wallace, I think you had a question. James?
Yes. First, thanks for the presentation. Very thorough. I want to follow up on what Dale just said and just ask, has Community Board 4 seen the floor plans? I know you submitted them to HPD.
They were reviewed by the board to the housing committee a number of years ago.
Got it. Okay. I apologize if I was at that meeting. I don't remember. I do want to ask.
You were.
I vaguely remember, and I think you asked all the tough questions, Joe, or all the members of the committee. Is there a brand associated with this hotel yet? Because we're just talking about the boutique. Is it luxury? Is it mid-tier? And you said mid-tier. Is there a brand associated yet?
Not yet.
Got it. And I apologize if I missed this. I was having some audio issues. We all know, I think, that this building has some not so great history with regard to legality and cure and problems. But it also has a very interesting history in terms of being an apartment building for women artists and writers. So again, if I missed this, I apologize. Will there be any homage to that or any indication? Because you're doing such a great job preserving the exterior and it's really beautiful. So I'm just wondering if there will be something to that effect. And again, if you said that, I apologize. I was having some audio issues.
Yeah, so I believe once the program of the building is developed a little more, they will bring in the history into the interior. It hasn't been done yet, but it's definitely something that we'd look to do.
Well, as everyone in the committee knows, I'm a big proponent of artists, but I'm also a big proponent of history and the history of this neighborhood. And that's a big part of it when there's, women artists, especially, who have been historically neglected. I think that would be super important. We'd love to hear more on that. Should you come back, or even if you don't. Other question is the presentation. Thank you. I want to ask, does MCB4 have a copy of that deck? Because I wanted to dig in on some stuff, and we were kind of going through the slides quickly. Do we have a copy of that? Because I didn't see it in our materials.
I'll put it into the Dropbox after the meeting.
Awesome, thank you. Last question. As far as the actual plans, I'm concerned about sound traveling from the rooftop restaurant, if there's ever any performers or amplified sound, and also light reaching the street. Like, as we're expanding some of this, the current structure of the building is very blocky already. So I can't imagine that there would be a negative impact, but I just want to make sure I'm not missing something. Is there going to be any decrease in the amount of light that reaches the street after these renovations? As I see them, all the expansion is in the back, so I imagine that it would not be the case. But I just wanted to hear it from you all.
I'll just address the noise question. AKRF was the environmental consultant on this project, and they concluded that there are no noise receptors in proximity to the residential, to the proposed restaurant use, and would not. Again, we would be in compliance with the board's noise criteria, et cetera, for operation of that space.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Leslie Williams, I think you had a question.
Yes, following up, but yes, thank you. Following up on what James just asked, on the south of the building, I understand there's going to be a business operation. From that perspective, what kind of sound and traffic will be flowing in and out of that south portico, if you will? What impact will it have on the residential units that are facing west, I guess, and maybe facing south, and also the building south of that?
I'm sorry, you're referring to along 9th Avenue?
The south side, yes, going south.
Well, the residential entrance would be on 57th Street, so it should not.
I get that, but I'm talking about on the map that you showed before, they showed some entrances on the south of the building, on the back of the building. Is that a passageway for storage, or is there an entrance for business on the back of the building?
There's no entrance there, Leslie.
There's nothing at all? So
no, the south is a lot line.
It's a lot line. So there's no business activity going on in the back of the building. Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Joe, you had?
Yeah, it's a few questions. One is, can you go back to the slide with the ADA entry? Because I cannot follow that, Nick.
Sure. So Janine has the slides. There you go. It would be slide number 19. Is that on your screen, slide 19? I don't see it.
No.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Coming up.
Well, okay. So
a little bit larger, Janine.
Yeah. And by the way, when you guys look at this again, on the right is a typical floor for the units. There's two types, but one is shown.
We need to see the left side of the screen, Janine.
Yeah. So on the left.
So could you explain?
If you zoom out just a little, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so so it's from West 57th Street, and there are, and Albert, you can jump in here too, because what I can do is it has a little bit of history.
So
because it is a LPC sensitive way of getting into the residential lobby. So it's with the original approval was through the areaway. So you see the accessible entrance arrow there, and a stair, and there's a chairlift that is associated with that stair. So it'd be automated and.
But how do you get to the residential entrance, which is to the west?
So yeah, so you would wheel into the landing right below the arrow there that says accessible entry. That's a landing. At that point, you can get onto the chairlift, which would take you down the stairs. You'd then be at the basement level, and there's a door there which you can enter and get to the elevator core.
Okay. Now that I had a feeling this was what it was. And Nick, I got to tell you, let me just give my sort of like general technical response. This is crazy because we work with landmark buildings all the time and historic properties all the time. And ADA always trumps the historic issue. The idea that we're going to have people to get into this building who have some disability, taking a lift down to a basement entrance and then crossing, and then they go into a cellar and then they come up to where? To an elevator that goes to the cellar?
Joe, so very good point. When we were going through the porticos and going through more reviews and more steps with LPC, I brought to their attention that the way the ADA currently works, I think we can have it become more efficient. And what we discussed with them, and it was preliminary, but it's something that we are going to go more in detail, is if you look at the arrow with the residential entry, to the left of that is have some sort of handicap lift, not something on a staircase, but an actual lift that somebody like rolls into, and either that would take you up to the first floor, or it'll take you down into the cellar into a lobby that'll lead to the elevator. The talks were preliminary. LPC said they'd be open to it as long as the enclosure was clear and wouldn't obstruct the facade as much, and there was a lot of transparency. So that's something that we're currently working on, and we are definitely going to improve the accessible entry into the residential portion.
I'd like to take you one step further. I've been in this position a couple of times with buildings that I've renovated. It is perfectly acceptable to LPC or State Historic Preservation Office that you can drop that stoop so it becomes an entrance at grade. And you can drop a bit of the entryway so it comes in and your lift is inside. I think it's absolutely inappropriate to have anyone who has any disability going down to a different location to a basement level to get into their residential building, especially if anybody, you currently have it for seniors, which we have a dispute about. We want to talk that through, but that makes no sense. An LPC should be totally flexible. And this should be something that we get worked out during the course of this ULURP, because that's not, I have never remembered what happened here, and I'm seeing it, and I'm kind of aghast, honestly. So we want to support you in this to make this functional for the people who live there.
Good point, Joe.
The next thing is a general question, and that is to Nick, why are you going through all of this 74, 711 items? The building existed. To my knowledge, if you have an existing non-complying use, except in the areas where you are increasing the degree of non-compliance, you would not have to get a waiver because everything exists. Can either James or Nick speak to this?
Yes, so good question. It was a pre-existing non-complying building. There are non-complying building provisions in the zoning resolution, and those provide that you can do alterations to a non-complying building, but that if you remove more than 75% of the floor area, that you lose the right to those non-compliant conditions. For that reason, we have to go back through the city planning special permit 74-711 process to restore some of those conditions to the building.
So that brings me to my next question, and this is not directed at the applicant, but directed at the Department of Buildings. This building was deemed by the court to be in the preservation area of the special zoning district. That's why the cure was invoked. In the preservation area, it's subject to 96-108 demolition. The board learned in a briefing just last week that in fact, the entire amount of the floor area of the building was removed with the consent of the Department of Buildings to do exactly what James just mentioned. However, that provision says you must get a special permit in order to do that. And this is, again, not to the owner at all, Department of Buildings. This clearly was invoked here. There was no question, and it was not at all dealt with. So this is the same issue we've had with multiple buildings with demolition, that we're going to take it up. We're going to take it up with them as part of this ULURP.
Yeah, I would actually like to respond to that, Joe, because I appreciate the question and the concern. We did look into this further after we spoke last week. When our client took over the building, it was an unsafe building. There were actually portions of floors missing on the interior. There were several city agencies deeply involved in the restoration of the building, including Landmarks, the Law Department, DOB. And the work that was done here, the removal and replacement of the floors, was not done under a demolition permit. It was done under an alteration permit that allowed replacement of the floors with no change of use. So I think what the I think
96-108 speaks to alteration or demolition. It is very specific, and it is not the first time we dealt with this. Our issue here is not about your application under 74-711. This is a precedent issue that this board has engaged with for the past 4 years with DOB. It is not directed at you. They acted inappropriately. They acted inappropriately. Sorry.
Thank you.
So that's why we're having all of these waivers needed, because you didn't go through that special permit process, and therefore now replacing more than 75%, although the zoning says if you remove and replace, it says remove and replace more than 20%, you go through a special permit. So my last issue, JD, is the cure question. And I think we want to return to this issue. The board took a position specifically that the residents who were harassed out of here were not all senior citizens. They were a broad range of people. And we'd like you to consider modifying that cure so it deals with families and individuals not 55 and older.
Thanks, Joe. Joe, thanks. Sarah, I think you had a question. Hi, Sarah.
Yeah, I did. Thanks again, gentlemen, for the presentation. And I echo Joe's sentiments on the accessible entryway and needing to get that changed. Just a couple quick questions. I just wanted to make sure that I understood the restaurant. You get there through the commercial entry. Is that correct? There would be the elevators that are in the hotel and then take you up to the restaurant level.
That's correct.
And there wouldn't be a way to access that from the residential entryway. way?
No.
The rooftop at all? Okay. Do you have any idea of what kind of retail will be going into the space on the ground floor? I don't know if that's been discussed.
The retail space on the ground floor is not a big square footage. So we envision it to be maybe like 3 smaller shops. I believe the size of the retail might be a total of 3,000 square feet divided into 2 or 3 stores. So probably some maybe some coffee bars and some light retail. Nothing big.
Okay, great, thank you. And my last question is, does the hotel and or the residential spaces, would they have any amenities accessible to them, like a gym, laundry? And would that be flexible? Like if there's amenities in the hotel, would that be accessible to the residents or anything like that?
So the residential portion of the building has its own recreational space as it's required to. And I believe they have their own laundry room and everything else. The buildings are set up and designed that they are really 2 separate buildings. Everything is separated. Services, fire, life safety systems, elevators, everything is completely disconnected from each other.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for answering my questions.
Good question, Sarah. Any questions from the committee remaining? Yes, Dolores.
It's not a question. I just want to say I really appreciate the complexity of bringing back to life this incredible building that I've been looking at my entire life, and hoping that it could be restored to the beautiful original way, which of course I didn't see how it looked originally, but I can tell you it is such a pleasure to see that clean brick. And I thank you for, at least at this point, removing the eyesore that has been there since after I finished elementary school. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dolores. I just have one question to Nicholas or Albert. The addition on the roof is fairly visible from 9th Avenue looking north. At least you see it. Is it going to be, is there any way to mitigate the look? Is it going to look like the rest of this beautiful building, or is it going to stick out like a sore thumb? Any thoughts about that, Nick or Albert?
Yeah. So the addition, it was important in the discussions with Landmark, the addition was to look like sort of rooftop bulkhead, a gray metal, and it was to look like traditional additions or rooftop accretions to buildings, not part of the original building. So it's not to look like with you like a brick or like the sort of original fabric, or like it was designed as part of the original fabric of the building.
Okay. Thanks, Nick.
What's the material, Nick?
The material is a gray painted metal and glass.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. I'm going to ask Dolores. I think we have some questions. I know Christine Gorman. I don't know if you're with us, Christine. Are you?
Well, Janine, are you able to bring people over to this style of meeting? Because we have a couple, otherwise I can just read
Bring
those.
over the people in the Q&A.
If you can bring over Christine Gorman and then Anita.
And Marie Walsh asked a question too.
And okay. If we can't get Christine, I think Anita's there.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Anita.
So my question, I'm going to start with my last question. I know I sent some questions in earlier. How soundproof is gray metal and glass? No answer.
So whatever gets built on the extension will comply with all the building codes and the sound attenuation levels. There's certain levels that need to be met. So it's not that the finished material really won't dictate that. It's everything that's behind that as well. You know, what's the wall, how thick, what's the insulation in the wall, how many layers of gypsum. It's the full composition of the partition and the roof that will dictate the level of sound transmission.
Albert, I think what we want to hear is that there won't be any sound coming out
Oh,
disturbing the nearby residents.
That's without saying. But yeah, there are certain levels we will comply with them, and we will.
I have a few other questions. Will there be an outdoor terrace contiguous to this restaurant? Will there be, are you anticipating outdoor dining?
Yes, we are.
You are. Well, there was an issue that came before the community board with the hotel across the street, the Hudson Hotel, because they had outdoor events and it became very disruptive to the neighborhood. So I don't know what the particulars, how many, well, how big is this restaurant? How many people are you, what's the size of the restaurant and how many people do you anticipate will be maximum allowed in the restaurant?
Can I rephrase that for a second?
Are you going for a special use permit? Thank you.
Yeah, what's the capacity of the roof, Nick, in terms of public assembly?
Thank you.
Yeah, Albert, unless you have that number offhand, that's something that we'd have to get back to you about.
I don't have the numbers offhand. We could definitely get back to you. We were sent over guidelines about rear yards and terraces and roof decks from the community board a few days ago, and it's our intention that that we will comply with them. And when an operator comes in, they will be before you and to comply with all those requirements, and we'd like them to comply with them as well.
Will the kitchen be on the roof?
Nick?
I'll defer to Albert on that.
Yeah, so I think so, yes.
Okay, so then the ventilation will be up there. Also the access to the restaurant, it's coming from, it's not involving the residential area at all. So it's going to be, the access will be from 9th Avenue, not from 57th Street.
Correct.
Okay, right. And I'm trying to remember some of my other questions that I had written before. Oh yes, the opening, that little, the courtyard in the middle. Does the restaurant abut the courtyard?
Yes, it does.
And you don't have any concerns of anyone falling into the courtyard?
No, there'd be a railing or a parapet around it.
Okay.
There have to be a normal parapet, Anita. 42 inches required by code.
Yeah, it doesn't even seem tall enough to me. Anyway, yeah, those are pretty much my questions. I'm concerned about the rooftop space and how it's going to impact the community.
I think, Anita, you also might want to mention that there's a little park across this avenue called Ballsy Park.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, yes, there is a park across the way, Ballsy Park. And, you know, people, I mean, it's closed though from dusk to dawn. So any outdoor dining or parties wouldn't affect the park. But what I am concerned about is that I live in the Park Vendôme. I represent the Park Vendôme, and we have the 4 buildings, 2 on 56th Street, 2 on 57th Street, and the noise can travel between the 2 buildings and, of course, just amplify as it moves up. And that is what happened with the Hudson Hotel. with the noise when because the outdoor space was set back. And of course, the noise was just going up within the setbacks, and it was just amplified. So I don't know enough about noise to really speak to that, but it's just one of my concerns.
Thank you, Anita. Christine Gorman, I think you're with us. There you are, Christine. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, JD. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you for the presentation and the chance to ask questions. I just, first of all, want to reiterate what Joe said about the disabled entrance. We don't want to make an entrance that treats disabled or, wheelchair-bound people in any way as, having to go through a different door or down through the basement. And so I just want to reiterate what Joe said on that. In terms of the open space, in the history of New York City, part of the reason for requiring more open space wasn't just about light, it was also about ventilation. Back in the 19th century, they were worried about tuberculosis. And in fact, the opening up of the tenements helped a lot with the TB epidemic that was raging through New York at the time. Now, of course, we worry about other infections like COVID, influenza, etc. So I'm concerned about the open space. If I understand correctly, you're following the open space as it was set up in the 1890s, and here we are living in 2021. If the floors had to be redone anyway, why not create more open space? And then finally, in terms of the roof, my personal preference would be for the roof to be in red brick so that it conforms with the rest of the building. But if it has to be metal for whatever reason, couldn't it be red metal instead of gray metal? Those are my 3 questions or 3 points.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine. What about that? Nick? Anyway,
maybe I'll just start on the open space question. So this is actually open space as defined by zoning. It's not open space as people might think of it in terms of a yard or an open garden in the rear. To comply with the open space, and Nick can chime in on this also, you basically have to reduce the footprint of the building and have a taller building in order to achieve in order to comply with the floor area regulations. So
no, I understand that, but the point is that, open space is about more than light. It's also about ventilation. And as we're learning, ventilation is very important. When you look in, for example, Hong Kong at the SARS epidemic that happened there, several years ago, they discovered that a lot of the issues of epidemiology had to do with the poor ventilation and the poor interior open spaces in the buildings.
Nick?
Yeah. Right. So, with the open space, I will say that one benefit of the reconfiguration of the floors or the replacement of the floors was we did take the opportunity to propose the removal, and we can get you more information on this because it's better shown in the ULURP application submission, but where we show the existing building plans and then we show the proposed, and there's a 5-story rooftop. There's a 5-story portion of the building that's inside that center donut, that center court that we were talking about. There's actually a 5-story building portion within that we have proposed to remove entirely. So that court was much more strangulated, if you will, and has been opened up. So we were able to do that, and we'd love to get you those drawings and show you what we've done there. And then in terms of the outside perimeter of the building, even as it goes around to the south lot line and to the rear, and then to the west, that perimeter hasn't changed. So it's really
I'm asking is,
yeah.
have you done any ventilation studies? So, I mean, as I said, this is what a lot of people would argue, that it wasn't the antibiotic era and the sulfa drugs that really tamed the TB epidemics of the 19th century. It was the opening up of those ventilation shafts and so forth. And so with a building of this age, which dates back to that time, is the ventilation adequate? That's my question. Then the other one is red metal versus gray. And then, as I said, supporting Joe's point about the disabled entrance.
Thanks, Christine.
Yeah, I can address the gray. I mean, it might sound like an echo, but so I apologize for that. But it really was the view in working with landmarks, and we do this on many of our projects, that when it's a one-story addition, when it's minimally visible, as this one has been deemed to be, that addition, they really don't want it to speak as if it were a part of the original fabric of the building. They want it to be, if seen, seen as sort of an afterthought, but oh, that's an elevator, oh, that's a mechanical unit, oh, that's something that is normally on roofs of buildings, not have a significant presence or voice that would take away from the original and restored fabric of the building.
And
thanks, Nick.
This is very normal for landmarks. It's not just this building. They always want a contrast between the old being restored and the new addition.
Right.
Thank you for explaining that.
Thank you, Christine. Thanks, Nick. Brian, did you have a question, Brian Weber? No, you did not. Brian?
I was just going to say that a lot of the concerns regarding the nature of the rooftop and the restaurant, I think, are going to land up before BLP at some point, and that they'll have to answer to them. And we know our colleagues or our fellow board members on BLP will put them through the ringer, because rooftop dining and bars are always a concern in the districts. I think that will obviously be addressed there.
Did you hear that, Frank? Going to put them through the ringer when they come before your committee.
Right, but we very rarely have them subject to ULURP in a 74-711.
Right.
And I just want to note, for the record, we should, when we get to our discussion, think about it. I think the rooftop restaurant use is going to be a future problem. And it did not occur to me until some of this discussion. It's the sound bouncing, number one. There's adjacency to the east, to the west, residential, but also this large central court. You're going to hear noise coming down from that rooftop.
Oh, yeah.
And this sounds like it's a recipe. I'm saying this to Mark and everybody else. This could be a recipe for a lot of future problems. I think you should really consider if that's the appropriate use. Of course, it's a lovely corner. It's fantastic. It's a view, all that kind of stuff. But boy, this could be a nightmare for you for the next, you're going to finish and be done. And then the next 5 years, you're going to get SLA complaints.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everybody.
Marie Walsh wanted to
Yes,
say
thank you, Joe. Marie, are you with us?
I think she got moved back over or something, JD.
Okay, Joe, do you remember what her question?
Yeah, there's stuff in the Q&A. Let me read it out, okay?
Okay.
She wanted to know about a professional sound engineer. And again, she echoed the issue of the sound bouncing back and forth from the Park Fund Dome to the Hudson. That was it.
Great. Thanks, Joe. I just want to throw one more thing out there. The little park across the way, it'll be great when you all get involved with other community members to support that little park.
She had one more question.
Sure.
She wanted to know what security, her buildings are 408 West 57th Street, and wanted to know what security measures will be put in place so no one can move from the Windermere roof to their roof to the west. That was very specific.
Good question.
Answer that, Nick?
We would put up again a parapet or a tall railing that somebody can't go over to get onto her roof.
Right. If they align, Mark, you have to do something more. right? If the roof's aligned, she's concerned about the public portion going to their private roof.
Yeah, so we put up a parapet or a railing, maybe something that's taller than 42 inches, so somebody can't climb over it.
Yeah, I think probably some sort of fencing is what they're looking for their security, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
No problem.
I'm going to thank everybody. Let's go back to the proposed zoning waivers. I think there were 6 of them, 2, 4, 6. Janine, could we go back to that slide of the zoning waivers, the proposed waivers, if you can find it?
That starts at 16.
Okay, thank you, Janine. So we have 6 of them. So let's see what the sense of the committee is.
JD, it looks like you have 2 more hands up, by the way.
Oh, really? Okay, sorry about that. Janine, I can't see any hands up on my screen. So Janine.
Barbara Matter from the public has her hand up, and Dale too.
Okay, who from the public? I didn't hear that.
Barbara Matter.
Barbara, thank you. Barbara, are you there?
I think she's on mute, JD.
I got it. Okay. I just want to wish the people who are doing this development all the best. I've been looking at this building that I call a building in a bag for 30 years. I'm a neighbor across the street, and I know that there's a lot of technical zoning, all kinds of things involved in this, but I just wanted to speak up as a neighbor who wants this to work and thinks it can only be the best for our neighborhood. That's it.
Hey, thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Dale, did you have a follow-up question or comment?
I did have a follow-up question and a quick comment, which was when you mentioned that there was a 5-story building mass inside of what's shown as courtyard, was that an infill building that came after the original construction, or was it originally built that way?
Yeah, it was part of the original fabric of the building. It was yeah, it was a much tighter courtyard. So we'll make sure that
a bay window?
I'm sorry?
Like a bay window?
No, it was
we're talking about the large void within in the center of the building, the hole in the donut, right?
Yeah, exactly. And for 5 stories of it, there was basically only a 5-foot wide shaft, and it didn't really become a court like we see it here until the 6th floor. Yeah, so it was a very narrow shaft for much of that court. So
I mean, the way I count it, you're decreasing the floor area in that case, with the exception of the addition on the roof.
They're netting an increase. They'll decrease one area, increase another one, net increase.
Oh, the net number is the increase. Okay, and then truthfully, I tend to agree with Joe's reading, which is that a lot of this doesn't seem to be zoning waiver material, since it's like a priori stuff. It's mainly the roof that seems to be waiver applicable. But in any event, I have no qualms about these, requests for waivers on this, including the roof structure. So thanks.
Thank you, Dale. My guess is we have to go through the waivers anyway in case.
Right. I'm sorry. I had one more thing about ADA compliance.
Sure, go ahead, Dale.
Because I know there was that discussion about the ADA compliance to the residential unit. If somebody's right now, as you have it laid out, I know it's subject to change, how will somebody who's using a mobility scooter get in?
To which part, Dale?
The residential.
So,
because aren't they using a chairlift?
Yeah, so that chairlift, somebody in a mobility scooter would ride into the chairlift. That would take them down into the cellar, and there's another lobby in the cellar that has the elevator in it.
So the device is suitable for both chairs and scooters. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Right. It is a platform that unfolds. It's not actually a chair that you would sit on necessarily. It's a platform. So yeah, you could ride a scooter onto it, or a wheelchair, or stand onto it.
Okay, gotcha. I had to ask that question, Martin Treat.
Thank you
Sure.
all for the proposed zoning waivers. I cannot see everybody on the screen. Would this work if anybody has an objection to any of the waivers?
I have none.
Speak up.
Actually, Frank had his hand up though.
Sure, Frank.
Oh, hi. I'm a co-chair of our liquor licensing committee. Just wanted to make a couple points quickly. First, I agree with Joe that I think, any rooftop outdoor use is going to be really problematic here. And second, what we heard from the community members, the outdoor space at the Hudson Hotel was probably the biggest problem and the longest lasting problem we've dealt with since I've been on the board. On the positive side, though, I will say that we've heard the operators say several times they're going to agree to our usual method of operation for outdoor space. And if that's the case, it means there's going to be no music or amplified sound outdoors. The outdoor space is going to close at 10 p.m. on weeknights and 11 p.m. on Friday and Saturday. And to the extent they have music or amplified sound inside, they have to keep the doors open so closed so the sound doesn't leak out into the outdoor space. So if they agree to those things, it does remove some of the most objectionable elements of use of outdoor space.
I have a question for Frank, JD. Frank, do we have a liquor license that is as part of a residential building on a roof? I'm just wondering. I don't
Not
remember.
that the only way I can think of it could come up is if any hotel, well, the Hudson, for example, had, and I think still has, residential units as well as being a hotel right across the street.
Yeah.
And they have multiple liquor licenses. I think that is chiefly the way it comes up if there are residents who are still in a building that's been converted to a hotel and the hotel gets a liquor license.
JD?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I'm going to move, because I think we're in agreement on these, A, C, D, E, and F, that we could give our pretty much like unqualified support for. But I think we should discuss B alone for a moment, how we could phrase that.
Good point, Joe. Let's go to B, to allow use group 6 restaurant above the second story.
I have a question on that. So group 6, what else is in group 6 besides restaurants?
So use group 6 includes a wide range of retail uses as well as office use. The waiver here is there's a zoning restriction on having those commercial uses on the same floor or floors above residential uses in a building. So that is the nature of the request here, since there's both residential and commercial use on the same floors as the residential.
Right, James, but that is the discretionary action that creates the restaurant use possibility.
Any commercial use would require that waiver, yes.
But since we talk a lot about restaurants and we know the owner wants a restaurant, this waiver creates the ability to do a restaurant on the top floor.
So are we opposed to a restaurant below the top floor?
Well, it actually is too. Isn't it also on this? Am I incorrect? Isn't there a restaurant on the 8th floor also? Or am I wrong?
No, just the 9th floor. Just the
9th floor. Can we pursue some discussion about limiting the capacity maybe on this? I'm just concerned that we're setting ourselves up for some ongoing difficulties as a community.
Well, let's throw out this. Are we opposed to a restaurant on the roof? No.
Dolores, anybody?
I guess we're not.
I support a restaurant.
Paul, was that you?
Yeah, I just said, nobody was speaking. I just said, I support restaurant on the roof.
I do too.
Also support it with the mitigation measures as discussed.
if there was some, decibel specification, as Joe said, this is a rare time when we have an opportunity to comment on something before it gets to BLP. And this is a structural issue. Like once you're creating an outdoor rooftop space, like it's going to be automatic. So
Yeah.
This is our opportunity to try and make that part of this conversation.
Yeah.
I'm really concerned about windows, residential windows on that center court below a functioning restaurant. I am living in my house and I am going to hear people dining just one floor separate from my living room or my bedroom. This could be a real problem. I haven't really thought about it before, and the applicant just didn't sink in because of that court.
Maybe it would help if they clarified with a floor plan of the roof. The large central donut, does the large central donut have any residential off of it? Or
Yes.
Is it this? Okay. All right.
They said that.
All right. Because I thought it was the smaller courts that were open to the roof. So I guess the question for the applicant is, does the restaurant open area but the open courtyard? Because if so, that's going to be a major sound problem for the residents living down there.
So, great question, Brian. There's one window per floor that opens up onto that courtyard from the residential portion. And I believe that window is only legally required on some of the floors, not all of them. And Nick can probably discuss that more in detail.
What is that window leading to, Mark?
One more time, Joe, I didn't hear you.
What is that window? What interior room is that window on?
So where it's legally required, it's the second bedroom. And on the other floors, I believe it's in the living room, dining room. I only have one of the floor plans with me because they're two different types.
It's okay.
Joe, could I ask you a quick question regarding this? Can something be done with the windows on the interior to double insulate them so that they are protected in terms of soundproofing them?
You can change the. What may help here is, because you have to agree to this, and we want to put this in writing as part of the special permit grant. You can do triple glazing. We had this issue. Remember Dolores down in Chelsea somewhere, where an owner agreed to do much higher standard of glazing to deal with the sound issue. So maybe that's the way that mitigates this up front. That'll help us figure out. And then if there's a problem, there's a problem. But we're really trying to manage it up front, right, Dolores? Let me do this somewhere.
Yeah.
Dolores, go ahead.
Yeah, honestly, what I'm hearing here is that we're in concept phase of a restaurant. We don't have any details, but we recognize this may be a real problem for the community overall. I don't think there's anything wrong at all with noting what we support and to say we are highly concerned about a restaurant within group 6, recognizing that there's possible other uses that if we were to grant it. But I think that if we articulate very clearly, we're highly concerned, we would like the applicant to consider other uses and to provide further detail. I think that's totally appropriate.
And I think irrespective of restaurant or not, this idea of doing some heavier glazing on that courtyard for the residential unit windows, no matter what, is a safeguard against what may happen.
But again, important. What we can say that, but I think that being even stronger to note that we're concerned.
Oh yeah, I'm with you.
Develop into something that's a problem. But JD, I wanted to mention that 2 new hands went up from the attendees.
Okay.
Mitchell and Jennifer.
I can't see a thing. So Janine, can you bring them up?
And while we're waiting for them to be transferred over, can I also maybe make a suggestion that the restaurant would not be allowed to have any sort of outdoor service area, maybe with the word, like they couldn't have a bar outside. no bartenders and setup bar, no open kitchen out on the exterior. All of that would have to be contained within an interior space. So
Paul, I'm thinking about the issue we had on 14th Street with that supper club thing where people complained about the glasses and the clanking of the silverware when they lived above. That was an ongoing, like just the ambient noise was a problem for people living there.
Yeah.
Right. But I do remember that. And that's what made me think about making sure that they didn't have, a bar service window or a kitchen service window in the exterior space of the restaurant, that it was everything service related was interior. So all you did hear was diners planking, but you didn't hear bartenders making drinks. You didn't have the speakers behind the bar. You didn't have the chefs cooking. All of that would be interior space only.
Yeah, excellent point, Paul.
Paul, we've seen a huge number of problems with, any kind of outdoor use, even with residential buildings, much further away. I'd find it very hard to support use of the outdoor space here, given the proximity of the people in the building and, the Park Vendôme and the surrounding buildings. I mean, those are just really close. And if you have even people just talking, eating, and drinking for 6 hours a night, 7 nights a week, that's a huge disruption.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Would the committee be amenable to saying we'll allow restaurant use but not outdoors?
I have one suggestion or comment. I mean, in a post-COVID world, outdoor social space is going to be really important. And, if we could get the assurances, whether they be decibel levels.
It never works, James. It never works. It doesn't. Ask the BLP committee,
What are you saying never works, Joe?
People make commitments and it gets operated differently, and it becomes the Hudson Hotel, before you came on the board, was a monthly discussion with many people coming to this board about eating outside.
So here's a question. Has those commitments, Joe, that you're talking about, were they ever written into the zoning waiver?
They were actually agreements back and forth as part of the liquor license, and they still didn't happen.
Right. And I understand what you're saying. If I'm interpreting you correctly, you're saying liquor license is also an important, lever and leverage to have over an operator. I just feel like there might be a common ground, because I would really hate to eliminate the possibility, but I hear what you're saying about, I'm the one who brought it up. So
James, if they've already agreed to no music, then an acoustical limit doesn't do anything, because it's just the people making noise. And, unless you're going to bar parties of 10 people drinking a lot, they're going to make a lot more noise than, a lot of tables for two having quiet dinners. And it just varies tremendously with the patrons themselves, which are sort of beyond the control of the restaurant in many respects. You can't.
I think Albert has his hand up.
Yeah, Joe brought up a good point. The residential windows in the courtyard can be all triple glazed windows. A trickle vent can be added onto the windows. That'll allow natural ventilation in without having to actually open a window. There are ways architecturally to work with the sound and try to mitigate it to the best as we can, as well as the guidelines that CB4 has.
Okay, I'll go back to committee again. Can we say something like we're not opposed to restaurant use, but we are opposed to outdoor use unless sound is totally mitigated? Or Joe?
Yeah, I'm going to note that I think the idea of the triple glaze, we should just say period as a condition of our approval, right? Separate and apart. But I think I think we should just do a quick straw poll on the committee, JD. I have no problem with use group 6, but the restaurant for outdoor restaurant use, I think is a problem. So
okay, let's have a straw poll on that. I cannot see everybody. Dolores, can you see everybody on the committee?
Can you take down the drawing, Janine?
Here you go.
Okay. So Joe, your suggestion is we are not opposed to restaurant use, but we are opposed if it's outdoors on the roof.
Yes, and just do a
Okay.
quick straw poll to see a sense how you feel.
Okay, so let's have the committee supporting that. Who supports that on the committee? Just
I'm not sure what we're supporting. Are we
I'm
supporting?
sorry,
a
I'll
restaurant?
rephrase, James.
Sure.
That we support restaurant use on the addition, but no outdoor use on the roof.
Okay, just raise
Even
your
though it's a
hand
beautiful spot.
if that's okay. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is that the majority of the committee?
Yeah.
Yeah, committee's 13.
So they may get it anyway, but at least we can put that in. There are 2 more callers in. I don't know who they are. Janine?
Cappy Haskin.
Cappy, are you there?
One.
Hi.
She has to bring her over.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Mitchell's speaking. He's over.
Hello, hello.
Mitchell, yes, I hear you.
Oh, great. I just,
hey, Mitchell, welcome.
Hello. Thanks for
Hi.
welcoming me here. I live at 408 West 57th Street, which is immediately west of the location. So just above that, at the top of that white sheet and adjoining the hotel, we have windows and balconies right there. I mean, right on, if that was a piece of paper, it would be, you know, if you dropped a penny off that roof, it would fall about 5 feet and land on one of our neighbors' balconies. So, I mean, you're talking about triple glazing down that shaft. This is right immediately next door. And I don't know who's going to come and take care of noise abatement in our building, but that's no way that's not going to be an issue. Also, we'd be very concerned about security and other things as well. Vermin, which is already an issue from that building. So we have that's a lot of potential trouble. Talk about serving food on that roof at night.
Gotcha, Mitchell. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jennifer, are you with us? I can't see you there. Or Cappy, are you with us now? Cappy Haskin?
You have to unmute yourself, Cappy.
Cappy, you're still muted, I think. Ah, there you are.
Am I here? Hi, I'm Cappy Haskin. I was a tenant at 406 West 57th Street until we were all vacated, forced out in 83, spring of 83. I can't believe it's almost 40 years. I'm glad it looks beautiful now, the building. I'm glad to see the land use committee is really paying close attention right now. And I'm always looking to see affordable housing. I wish there were more, but anyway, it is what it is. And it seems to me that a restaurant on the roof would be kind of a disaster if to the neighbors, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, I'm glad to see somebody's working on this building. It was quite an experience being there and a worse experience living. And Joe pointed out, by the way, that there were a great variety. There was a great variety of people living in that building. We did have seniors and not so senior. I was young then, so it would be nice to see a nice assortment of people now. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Cappy. That's just wonderful to hear. Somebody who lived in the building back then.
Been watching it all these years and wondering what's going to happen. You know, wait, hoping I could go back in and get that pair of glasses I left behind.
That's great, Cappy.
Thanks.
You're welcome, Cappy. Thank you. Jennifer, are you with us?
No, I didn't have anything to say. I joined late, but what I just heard what Cappy said, and that's amazing. Cappy, where do you live now?
I live over on the urban renewal site on 11th and 51st.
Why did you have to move?
Well, I think we
were all forced out of the building. The landlord at the time wanted to redevelop it basically, or do something with it. It was a corner, obviously it's a corner spot, and it was prime, and he harassed people out. Whoever he couldn't buy out, he harassed out however he could.
Which
And
is what's happening all over New York.
yes,
The Department of Buildings actually vacated the building
but at
because
the
the
end, let me,
landlord damaged
yes,
the
at
beams.
the end, when we were, they got a judge. Well, actually, they shopped around and got somebody in Queens, a buildings department inspector, to say that it was in danger of imminent collapse. And as our lawyer at the time, who was with HCC, pointed out, no judge wants to be held responsible. You know, the headlines say building collapses, judge, you know. So the judge decided to vacate the building for 6 months. So we had a week to get out. We couldn't sleep in the building. We had a week. We had to pack. The cops were there, lights, barricades. It was a nightmare. And that was why we had to leave. So, and we never went back, of course.
I lived in Chelsea where a building actually collapsed 5 years ago.
I'm sorry?
Okay,
But I live in
can we
Chelsea.
move on?
Yeah, of course, because you guys never want to listen to me. Go ahead.
Well,
No,
just the last thing is that I just want to say that shortly after we were all vacated, there was an earthquake in Manhattan, believe it or not, and nothing in my building moved at all. So it certainly didn't collapse.
Solid building. Thank you, Kathy. I think we're going to have to move on. We've got two more items, and they're pretty important. I want to thank Richard, Nick, James, everybody on your committee and your team for coming, and Mark Tress for coming to see us. So, Joe, what's the want to make our motion?
Yeah, I wanted to do a quick recap of the items that we found beside the main issue. That we asked the owner to work with LPC to deal with the accessible entryway, so it's one accessibility, not an alternate means to come in, and bring that stoop down to ground level so you can come right in. That there be security for fencing for the 408 building to the west, irrespective of whatever use is on the roof. That we asked them to return to the cure agreement to broaden it so it's not just senior citizens. That's a condition of our approval, but all kinds of families. Also, just to note that this cure housing will be subject to HPD lottery. That's how it works now. And we want that 50% community preference to make sure people come back after, you know, community people get preference. And the last piece, then the triple glazing we talked about in the shaft. And the last piece is that we do not support, as we did the straw poll, the restaurant use, other uses, restaurant use in the building, but not exterior. That's the recap in total.
Thanks, Joe. Do we have a second on that?
I would just, if we could add something about
Joe, James, let's get a second on it and then we'll discuss it. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, James, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add the fact that the history of the building has a history.
Yeah, got it, James.
Thank you.
Thanks, James. Any other comments? All in favor of this? Great. Thank you, committee, and thank you, team. Windermere team, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Beautiful, beautiful building.
Thanks.
Great work. Now,
you all.
Janine, if we can go back to the committee. And we've got another item to take up, which is very important. And this is about the proposed conversion of the hotels and commercial spaces. We've talked about this in other committee meetings. We're going to talk about it again. It's going to be talked about at the Chelsea Land Use Committee. Joe and Savannah of CHDC have compiled I think you've all seen it, a kind of list of all the couple of the various proposals from Gail Brewer's office, from Astoria, Queens, some guy out there, and from the mayor. And then Joe is spent a lot of time compiling a set of proposals that should come from us, the committee. And we can talk about those tonight. And then Paul and Betty are going to take it to their committee. And Paul is going to write the letter from both committees, and it'll go back to the executive committee. And on the executive committee, folks who know nothing about this will weigh in and tell us what it should be. But Joe, a lot of work on this. It's so important. I don't know if Barbara Blair from the Garment District is with us, and other people. If you're here, you get a lot of chance to weigh in on this very important thing. So Joe, take it away.
Sure.
As briefly as you can.
No, I'm going to make it really tight and brief. In the first document that was sent out on Friday, that gives you a list of all the various proposals floating around regarding conversion of hotels and B and C office space to residential use, requiring some sort of affordable component. Remember, we had the city side, which is merely the city is seeking through either the Department of Homeless Services or HPD to acquire hotels for affordable housing, shelter use, or supported housing use. On the state side, multiple builds listed in the document, but I think the most insignificant important thing is that in the state budget that was adopted, there was $100 million allocated for this purpose. However, I had a briefing with State Senator Hoylman's office. That money has no authority to be spent until the legislature can now weigh in on the means and methods and criteria for spending it. So that exists today, but we are protected from this sort of gold rush thing until there's specific how to do it. The board had a briefing about 4 weeks ago with the state Senate about these bills, and they are waiting for our board to give them some guidance or guidelines on what is a good way for this to happen. So that brings us to the next document. And that is a series of policy considerations and let me go to the map first. Janine, can you bring the map up with all the social service uses?
Sure, give me 1 moment.
Hey, Joe, while Janine's bringing that up, can you update and clarify a little bit more on the state legislation on conversion of commercial space and that $100 million? The last I had heard, and it of course probably changed, is that conversion of commercial space within our district wasn't going to happen because the boundaries were in other parts of the city. Have the boundaries changed?
Yeah, that entirely changed.
Okay.
None of that is being considered yet, Paul. All those bills are still pending. Merely there was a budget allocation for this use. So the Senate and the Assembly realized there was a lot more to be discussed. So they just put some money aside and they're going to act on this now in May or June.
Right. Paul, were you referring to, actually it was hotels between Chamber and 110th that were restricted from conversion. They didn't mention anything about
bill did
commercial.
not pass.
Yeah.
True. You're right, Brian. You're right. I was thinking about the hotels that were eliminated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for
Can
that
you make that
clarification.
larger, Janine, so we can see it? Right, and then pull it down a little bit. Yeah. So that's good. No, up a little bit. Sorry. Yeah.
Into the 30s, I think. If you go,
we need to see it like from 52nd down to the 30s.
So move the map a little bit north. Yeah. Down to
almost
like 34th.
One more push. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
So what we put together, and this has been circulated a lot to committee members, is now Ginny, can you turn the text to voice to text off because it's covering the map. Yes, no?
I think you have to turn off subtitles on your own, Joe. I had to do that myself.
It wasn't on mine.
Yeah.
I turned them off.
Okay, thank you. So this shows you the number of possible hotel sites for conversion, but more important, it shows you our supportive housing and our homeless shelters. So one of the considerations and the policy consideration when we talk about it in a moment is how conversion of hotels or conversion of B&C office space is in proximity to social service use. Jeannie, can you bring up that document next? The policy considerations and recommendations.
Sure, 1 moment.
Sure.
Looking at that map, we're actually missing a few hotels in there. Sorry, Savannah.
It is a work in progress, Brian. You keep
yep,
on
I know. I
information,
keep sending you guys. I keep sending you guys more stuff.
And by the way, I want to really commend the committee, Paul and Betty's committee for Chelsea. They have done a major effort to figure this stuff out south of 30th Street, and they're sending in data like you would not believe to get this map really full.
Yeah, we want to thank Savannah for taking all of our data.
Oh my God. So wait till the document comes up in a moment.
This one?
Yes. So in the document that was sent to the committee members, these first two paragraphs, make it a little bit larger, I think. Did everybody read that? Yeah. And I'll make the display a little larger so we can see the whole thing. There we go. This just sort of reiterates what we've been through so far and actions we've taken. And then the next section, which are the general principles, if you can scroll down. This section is merely a reiteration of our letter from April 7th. So that just lists out what positions we've already taken. The real discussion we need to start to think about starts on line 50. There's no lines on this one though. So it's go down, please. Oh yeah. And we should talk about this section by section. So this is for discussion. It's about locating shelters. The first thing that we've talked about a lot in both housing and land use has been new shelters should not be located in proximity to existing clusters of shelters. Facilities are the supportive housing, but I don't know what the radius should be. New shelters should have no more than a certain size. And then all shelters must include adequate support, social service support, and office space on site. I think the third bullet, we're all pretty much in agreement with, that it makes sense to have good facilities as part of a shelter. Can I get some nods on that?
Can I just maybe add a clause to that third bullet and for consideration? Yeah. I recall there was a hotel that didn't have sort of a common space for the shelter residents to go to that was not on the streets. And I'm wondering if we want to include a clause in there about adequate common space for residents.
Yes. Well, why don't we call it like a tenant common space, something like that?
Yeah, so, right? But I think that bullet needs a common space area where people can congregate and not be out on the sidewalks.
Right. It is really part of the normal facility that you would build. Right.
Joe, I just want to on the first bullet point and also on the second use the term.
Can you stay on the third on the third for a second?
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. So in other words, like just on the third, are we with adding the common space that seemed to be a good thing? We can agree on one piece of this. Is there a nod?
Yes.
Okay. And okay.
Oh, sorry, I'm just wondering if, and I'm sorry if we skipped, but if the way to determine like clusters and avoid cluster excessive density is not to go with a radius measurement, but like a density formula. I don't know, based on.
Oh, we're coming back to that, Gail.
Okay.
Gail, I was trying to do the simplest one first.
Joe, on bullet 3.
Yes.
It says all shelters must include adequate social service support. If it would be accepted as a friendly amendment, say ample, because I think adequate really puts it on the borderline. But if you say ample, like there's no discussion, like it needs to be.
Why don't we say required?
That's fine. And then in terms of office space, say staff office space, just to make it.
Yep.
That's it.
I guess my only question for that is, I kind of feel like that's something that everyone nods yes to and says, great. But if you ask any shelter, they all say, we have adequate social services.
No. This is
how are we defining that?
This is setting standards for conversion.
I understand that. And how are we defining what adequate is? Do we need to define what adequate is? Because we've had experience where we have social service providers saying we have adequate social services, and we as a community know that in fact is not true. So how is there some way that we could better define it?
Let me note some of these questions down, because maybe between now and CLU, we can get some more metrics that might make sense.
Sounds good.
But I think identifying the issues where we really need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Then let's go back to the first bullet, which Dale was speaking to. Go ahead, Dale.
Well, yeah. I think I was speaking to the same. I'm sorry, Dale.
Sorry.
Go ahead. You're on mute.
Sorry, I was in my refrigerator. Okay. I was saying like perhaps there's a density formula instead of like a linear measurement given. I don't know how that would work exactly based on like number of units in a given zone, and like a ceiling of percentage of units, the supportive units, rather than like I think a radius measurement could run into problems of like logic.
I was just picking up on the idea because that's how the liquor licenses work within a certain radius.
I think
maybe it needs to be qualified with a radius plus a number, Dale. Does that sort of work together?
Radius plus a number, what kind of number?
In other words, if there are, within a 1 block radius or 500-foot radius, if there are more than 200 types
Right.
of
Something
rooms,
like
I'm
that.
saying, like, yeah, I don't quite know how to do it, but like that's the idea maybe.
Like a qualified radius measurement, but yes.
Right.
If you're in a low density area that, yeah, I agree.
So I have a question about the expression existing cluster of shelters. It's almost as if we've learned that if you have one shelter on a block, you don't want to put another shelter there. That all of a sudden makes a cluster. You have one or more shelters. How are we defining existing cluster?
Why don't we delete clusters and just say existing shelters? Because that's the intent.
Right. Okay. Because I think that, yeah, because that implies we need to have a mass of shelters, and we're already seeing that is
right.
That is a bit of a challenge. Okay.
Any further questions on the first bullet? How about the second, in terms of a general size of a shelter for a change here? If there is some kind of conversion, do we want to put a limit on what a size of number of rooms a shelter can be?
I think we should, Joe, but I don't know what that number is. Perhaps we can do some research. For instance, Project Renewal across the street from me, I think they have 50 rooms. There is a number that seems to work well. I think we can do some research on that.
Any other thoughts on that? Because we want to try to figure out Dolores.
I do think that we have some experience with BRC and what the board experienced when advocating for a smaller size when BRC was here, and recognizing the points that we made in those previous letters from probably almost a decade ago. I think that may be helpful as or sort of a guideline of the points that were made there. And I don't have that letter. I went and looked for it that discussed the type. The important thing is, siting is not really just about the number of spaces. It's also going to be, is that a side street? What else is on the block? So I think it's important to take the cues from what we learned at BRC, which was an entirely residential block that was a very narrow street, and having 300 plus beds was just outsized for that particular block.
And we certainly remembered how wonderful those public meetings were. Yeah, Dolores, why don't we go back to that? We'll look at that because we had a lot of qualifications in those letters about BRC. And
I'm sorry, I apologize, but I'm going to ask that, just as a note, there's some chat comments that are going on that are not related to our conversation. So if we either disable the chat or we just ask people to please be respectful in the chat. Thank you.
Yeah.
Joe, can I ask you a quick question? This is Leslie. In looking at this document, I don't see where it is. Maybe I'm missing it. Where does it cite that the board has to be notified in advance, and the timing and notice? Is there something that we can?
That's up in the general principles.
Okay.
Yeah, no, because that's from our prior letter, Leslie, that I incorporated here.
Okay.
All right, so I think,
I think that one point that was made, that it's not just about room numbers, it's also about the appropriateness of location, and not just the proximity to other shelters, but other social services.
Well, that's what's on here in the first bullet.
Does it say other
shelters, social service facilities, and other supportive housing?
Right.
I think we've learned that all these things interact one to the other, so you can't just take them in isolation.
Mm-hmm. Can we have one more bullet that says citing, before citing anything, there should be a conversation with the community board and the local community?
It's up in the general principles, JD, already.
Gotcha.
Mandatory public
comment. So I think we got some good feedback here. Let's go to supportive housing conversions. So these are now permanent housing, right?
Really, sorry, Joe, I hate to interrupt you. I think with all shelters must include adequate. I want to re-emphasize this. This needs to be super clearly defined. This is so utterly vague. what is adequate needs to come from the community boards or from an outside person looking in. And to Brian's point, it can't come from the providers.
We're going to change that language to make it much tighter. There's no question about it. This is our first go at trying to get this together. Thank you, Mark. Let's go to supportive housing. Can you bring it down a little bit, Janine, so we can see the whole section? So supportive housing, we say the same thing, that we look at it in total, right? And that it's in proximity to existing clusters of shelters, social service facilities, and other supportive housing. And again, this is within, I would say, we'll go to Dale's idea of radius plus numbers to give an idea. Does that make sense to folks? To just have a parallel?
Yeah, Joe, I think that a lot of this language could repeat the same thing about common space.
Yeah, of course.
A lot of those things. Something else.
I think the third bullet is new because this is part of supportive housing. So this issue is, remember, we're speaking about the city and the state. The city's model is 60% homeless units and 40% community referrals. And one of the proposals at the state level is 50-50. And then there's some of them don't have anything. So I think we definitely want to say that if there's supportive housing, which means housing with social services, use the city's model, which is a tried and true model that's worked for the past 2 decades. Thoughts about that?
So the city's model is 60-40?
Yeah.
And when it's 60-40, that means the whole entity. It's not 60% supportive, 40% affordable, or is the whole thing supportive housing?
The nomenclature is 60%. Everything's called supportive housing, 60% homeless, 40% community resident. But everyone gets support regardless of what referral source you come from.
Joe, on the next bullet, can I ask for a little clarification
I've never heard that data. I've never heard that being a perfect mix. I don't know where that.
No, I'm not saying it's a perfect mix. It's just that it's a mix. Instead of the state reinventing the wheel, which is a problem, let's try to work with something that actually is there. So we're talking about true supportive housing. Yes, Paul?
So on the next bullet, new supportive housing should not only be for single individuals, but also for families. Do we need to sort of clarify the differences of the shelter, like a shelter for individuals, shelters for families, shelters for mental health issues, shelters for, should we break that out a little bit better?
Do you mean back in the shelter section?
In this supportive housing, and that it says here, new supportive housing should not only be for single individuals, but also for families. Are those mixed buildings with both individuals and families?
So
can you clarify that for me?
In our district, we only really have supportive housing for single individuals, but across the city, there is supportive housing for families. So it is 1, 2, 3-bedroom units for families with multiple social service needs, whether they be mental illness, autism, various things.
So, all right.
Can I ask again, Janine, to maybe turn the chat off, because we're having one member constantly responding to everyone's comments, and that would not happen in a meeting. Sorry, Paul, go ahead.
No, I think that clause is it just led me to a little bit of confusion about whether, so I think we need to strengthen that a little bit more to include.
Well, to make it clear what I just explained, right?
Exactly, yeah. Thanks.
Okay, good. But questions from the committee about the understanding now that we want supportive housing, not just for single individuals, but also for larger households. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Hey, just on the first point on there, I'm just noticing we have existing clusters of shelters.
It'll all get made parallel. Don't worry about it. I mean,
okay.
Part of this is like the discussion to make this thing better. So we get the input from the committee, and then CHKLU is going to do much better because it'll be improved by the time it gets there.
I have all this input I can already take.
So the last item is that supportive housing should be part of a larger affordable housing development, not just on its own, in order to have better integration. How do people feel about that?
I agree with that.
I agree 100%.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
a very effective model.
Yep.
Should there also be something about the scale of the supportive housing, just like we talked about the scale of the size of shelters?
Yes, we should have a scale issue here too. Correct.
Right.
I mean, this is like, and by the way, the city now does integrate supportive housing into regular affordable housing developments. Clinton Housing did this years ago. The city was against the idea of integrating affordable housing and supportive housing to the same building. Now they do it, and it works much better. Let's go to the next section then.
So again, back to that point of scale, how again do we define that? Because, if we look at the 30s, for example, we have a lot of hotels that are, in Gail's proposal.
I think the issue here is, again, let's throw out some numbers and think about it.
Okay.
But also it's what works best, right? To put 300 or 400 people with a lot of social service problems in one building probably is not the best recipe for success.
Absolutely.
It's not.
Yes. So we probably want to talk about the size for us. The city of New York will normally do supportive housing. They like money more than 50 units, like 100 units now. So that's the thing to keep in mind. Let's go to the last piece, which is affordable housing conversions. And this is something that our community always speaks to. To reinforce economic diversity, conversion should be for a range of incomes, not only for low-income households. How do people feel about that?
I feel that we should state middle and moderate. And
okay.
Including
make that change.
I was going to ask, should we put AMI levels in here? Like put in
I don't
the
think we should get
upper
that
tier?
not that specific, but I think it's good to say not just for low income, but for low, moderate, middle, for a range, so it's really clear. I'm afraid of being too prescriptive at this level of discussion first.
Joe, actually, I to Paul's point, if you actually are saying low, middle, and moderate, by giving the ranges of those AMIs, I don't think that's being prescriptive, but I think it just shows that we are looking at the range and it's being a little bit more precise, just in case someone wants to define middle as something other than what we understand middle to be.
Well, it's consistent with our long-term board policy we've had for years, so we can just drop it in there. Very easy to do.
I apologize for this because it's sort of out of order, but the last bullet point is talking about an owner operator, and I didn't see in any other of the bullet points for other categories where we are really trying to figure out how to solve the problem that we see now, which are bad operators. I just don't know where that fits in with the previous two categories where we're talking about.
It's up in the general principles, and it speaks to if they have a bad track record, don't have them be part of these programs.
Yeah, I understand the general, but I'm just wondering if one of our asks, our specific asks, is how. And again, this is a tough one. I don't know that this is necessarily a good idea. How do we interject ourselves as a community at large in, being part of that screening possibly, or being able to advise when we've had a track record with a particular, so that it's not just someone in the agency who's looking at a checklist, but we have some input into commenting on the operator. It's just a thought.
I think in the general principles, because we're asking for public notice, if that is achieved, then that's our opportunity to comment, oh, this was a bad operator we've dealt with, and that's a problem. So it's the public notice that's really key for this.
Got it. Okay, thanks. Sorry, I took us off of our last section.
All right. So the next bullet is, again, the whole density. And the idea is specifically in this case, where there is a density of social service uses or supportive housing, that we only support conversions for affordable housing, not the social service uses. So if you look at, for example, on 47th and 48th Street between 9th and 10th Avenues, you look at the map, there's a density of social service use. I don't think we'd be in the position to support supportive housing at that location because it's got too much stuff already. That should be only affordable housing. That's the idea behind this. And the map, I think, will sort of helps us understand that. Thoughts, folks?
I agree with that. I think, just anecdotally from my experience in speaking with staff at one of the temporary shelters here, They just nodded their head the other day and said it was crazy to put us between a methadone clinic, a needle exchange, and an existing shelter. It's just
right,
not a healthy recipe.
Right, but now we're talking about our existing infrastructure that exists.
Exactly. So I'm just supporting the idea that it would be beneficial to use that for affordable housing and not add another social service component where there already is pre-existing social service components.
So just how to Leslie and Sarah, you haven't said much about that. How do you feel about that? That's a yes?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the next item is about the Housing Connect lottery. So these two items are in tandem. Where there's a lottery, this also should apply actually to supportive housing because the 40% community gets a lottery to happen. That there's got to be a 50% community preference. That's how it's done today. But we also found always that people need help knowing how to apply in these lotteries and what to do properly. So that's something we've always asked for. Thoughts or questions about that?
Sorry, Joe, I apologize and continue to go out of order. Can we, because I want to just clarify for the previous bullet point, were you referring to reserved for formerly homeless?
Yeah, I think our nomenclature is not right. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, and I think that that's key because that is recognizing that just being able to ensure that our affordable housing is there for people that are worked through their problems and now are housing ready.
You know,
right?
I don't know if you say formally at that juncture because they have a homeless designation to get in.
So what you were thinking of are folks that are currently in the shelter system and that have a voucher, they're ready for a home and they can be placed.
I'm sorry, I skipped it. I apologize. In this third bullet, the city now requires for all of its programs a 15% set aside for homeless shelter referrals.
Referrals, perfect. That's
to affordable housing. But my question for you guys is that we left that as a blank? Do we want to go with that current percentage?
Can I ask you where you got that percentage from?
Most recent projects that have come to the board, we've had that. They've like our MTA and the DEP ones were both with 15% housing, and the things that I've worked on in the last like about 8 or 9 months, same thing. It's like it seems to be now a requirement imposed.
Is this something, Joe, that would be just for our neighborhood, or are you thinking every neighborhood would have that percentage? Is that your?
I have to say, you know, we have to give our neighborhood what we want to deal with, and then we see some of these things may end up being part of the state. Yeah. Our legislators are really asking us give them some recommendations on how this thing should work properly.
So I would say for this neighborhood, I would say that percentage should be really low compared to like Queens, that has little to no affordable.
I have a question.
So,
yes, James. Oh, sorry. Yes, James.
Sorry. I guess my question is it the best idea for it to be reserved rather than priority? Because reserved implies that it would remain unoccupied unless or until a homeless person is ready to occupy it.
No, it's actually part of the standard HPD marketing. So there's a lottery, 15% come out, and the Department of Homeless Services makes referrals for those 15%. There's no lack of demand on those, James.
Okay. Question, Joe. The homeless or formerly homeless, do they get support?
Yes, that's the one thing missing from here. In the affordable housing part, we've said consistently in all these developments now, there must be supportive services if there's that component. We should put that bullet in. I agree 100%, JD.
You know, honestly, you know, it's arbitrary, us deciding on a number or a percentage. I would say that, you know, if the city right now is going with a number, honestly, I don't know that it makes sense for us to be saying higher or lower. The truth is how do we end homelessness? We end homelessness when we create stability in housing. And if we have affordable units that are available and people can also get services, we may break that cycle of homelessness for that particular family. So I don't know that it makes sense to lower the number, lower than what the city's already asking, but I also don't know without enough input, whether or not it makes sense to be throwing a random number out there. Even
Well,
higher.
one of the things, Dolores, is the generis bill for affordable housing conversions, not supportive housing, for affordable housing, says 50% homeless. I don't think that's a recipe for success. Because there are no, in those, there are no services attached to them.
If the rest of the building is supportive services, maybe that works. But
Right,
again,
exactly.
I'm only expressing that I'm concerned about throwing an arbitrary number because I don't think that we're experts in that. I do think that this is an avenue for breaking the cycle of homelessness. So I'm in favor of it being set aside. I just don't know that I can opine on a number.
Should we maybe just refer to the city's current practice at the 15% in affordable housing?
I think it should be conditioned across the boroughs. And I think we should say, based on what the borough representation is, we condition it upon that. So in other words, you're not getting 50% in Hell's Kitchen and 0% in Queens. And that is happening today.
My feeling on this is that if the city has a standard of 15%, and we're generically accepting of that number, that we have a bigger fight to fight with them, that they don't buy distress hotels on blocks that already have shelters and other services.
And do
so
100%.
I wouldn't want to pick a fight over this number when we have a bigger fight to pick with them.
Good point, Paul.
So let's just put it out for thoughts, Paul, and you can chew it around in your committee. We'll use 15 for now, but then, the whole point is this is a public discussion, right? So we have to, it's great that we're picking up bits and pieces. I'll work with Savannah to revise this, to pick up all the comments, send it to CLU in a revised version. And let me just ask in general, to go around the room, everybody. James, any other comments on this? Dolores? Leslie?
No.
Sarah?
Great job. Thanks, Joe.
Brian?
I'm sorry, were you calling on me?
Yeah, any other comments?
Yeah, I think my overall concerns in this whole mix. I mean, my chief concern is the amount of hotel rooms we have within our district, which is significant. And so when we're talking percentages, we just have to be careful that, look, percentages of 10,000 hotel rooms is significant. I know it's not going to come to that, but so let's just keep our eye out for unintended consequences. But otherwise, I think this is really a great start.
Dale?
I think JD pointed to the idea of pointing to specific instances in the district which are successfully run supportive units and to talk about the size range. Say,
yeah.
We've had success with this group, which runs a 50-bed unit. We've had success with this group, which runs a 75, but whatever the range is.
Like, we don't even notice the 50-bed units at all.
Right.
And I would also use historic data to talk about why it's successful. Down, 311 calls are down, 911 calls are down, crime is down.
Bob Benfato, thoughts?
No, I think it's fine. I would go with the 15. Like you said, I agree with Dale and JD about looking for examples of things that work and what their amounts are, and go to the Chelsea Committee and Community and see what we learn from there.
Okay. Frank?
All my thoughts have been covered by other people. Thanks.
David Skolnick? David, you there?
Yeah. I don't really feel qualified enough to put numbers to these. So that's, I'm sort of deferring to people who might.
No, but in general, the overall approach, you feel good with
the overall approach is great.
Okay, good. All right, I think we've gone around the room there, JD. Oh, JD, sorry, you're the last one.
Just great work, Joe and Savannah. One other thing to committee members, this is going to go through a process with the Chelsea Land Use Committee and the Executive Committee. So if you have any thoughts when you read it through, send it to Joe or me or Paul or Betty for consideration. I think we may have a comment from the community that is with us. Jonathan, I'm sorry, I don't know your last name. Are you with us?
Jonathan Hawkins.
Hey, everybody. I'm here. So
Hey, welcome.
I'm here on behalf of the Garment District Alliance, just here mainly to listen tonight. We haven't adopted a formal position on the legislation, the budget proposal, or any of these nuances. There's a lot of upside to having more residential in the neighborhood. Obviously, a lot of property owners like the possibility of having more uses for their building, but unsurprisingly, we are very concerned about the situation that's been created in the western half of the Garment District this past year. So we share all the concerns you've been discussing here about ensuring that sort of condition isn't allowed to continue or be made permanent, and that the density is considered and there's better supportive housing, all those things. So we're on the same page on that.
Thank you. So I just want to know for process, we'll take all these comments today, revise the document, send it out to the committee members again to comment on, and then it's going to, Paul, when is your meeting?
Next week.
Okay.
I don't know, Janine, when is our meeting?
Who is on Monday? I believe the 19th.
There you go.
It's on Monday the 19th. So Monday, yeah, it's Monday evening.
So Paul, your committee will have the advantage of all these things modified already, kick it around more, and then we'll all engage before executive committee where this will be like a joint thing with all the committees, okay?
That's great. And as was said, anybody on this committee that has input before Monday or thoughts after tonight, feel free to send them and we can incorporate it pretty quickly. Thank you.
And we need to adopt this in May as a board because the elected officials in Albany are very interested to hear what our point of view is as these pieces of legislation. One or other of them is going to get adopted sometime in May or June. So we have to get our voice heard early. Thank you very much tonight for talking about this very seriously.
And the other thing, Joe, is I do want to include some of the city officials because the hotels would be city issue and the commercial office space would be.
No, it's both.
State, right?
Both.
Okay, but
yeah,
I don't want to.
$100 million is sitting there for any use right now.
Right.
Great. Joe, thank you. Great job. And Savannah as well. Janine, are there any other community members that wish to comment or speak?
No, I don't see any more hands up.
Ooh, okay. Well, great work, everybody. Really good work.
Incredible.
We have one more item and we're going to go back into the past. As you know, this committee and the board had suggested that there should be a Hell's Kitchen Historic District and a Patrick's Market Historic District. We have heard back from LPC. Not so good news. So we need to know what that news is and how to respond. So Bob Benfato, as with your hat of the BID down there and Patrick's Market.
Patty's
What was the
Market.
response from LPC? I think they called it Patty's Market, those people, yes.
They called it Patty's. They said they read everything that we submitted to them, that staff went out with the chair of Landmarks Commission. They looked at everything, but don't believe there's enough left in the neighborhood to connect with the former Patty's Market and reject the decision.
No, or anywhere in Hell's Kitchen.
Or anywhere.
It was remarkable.
The one good thing we still have going is the state is looking into registering it, and now that things are getting a little better and things are opening up and we can get out there. Joe presented to the bid about a month ago on Patty's Market, and so the bid staff are going to be working with Joe and his staff and Jesse and his staff on actively pursuing at least the state registration and the federal registration of it by reaching out to the businesses in the area within the Patty's Market terrain.
I just have one comment, if it's okay.
Sure, James. We're gonna go through everything, but I want to get, because the response is going to be for both. So James, I'll go right to you.
The second half of the letter that Joe's going to cover.
Yeah. What I want to note here is the issue of historic districts in Hell's Kitchen was a political commitment made as part of the Garment Center rezoning between the mayor and the city council speaker. And the fact that happened in 2018, we produced a report in 2019, and we get a response back from LPC in 2021 saying basically that letter, in my reading of the politics, thank you very much, kiss off, goodbye.
But Joe, would you explain, there was also the Hell's Kitchen Historic District in that letter.
Yeah.
Tell us
Right.
what that was.
Right. So again, the Garment Center commitment happened. The community board had an allocation of funds to do a study by Tony Robbins. There were 2 historic districts proposed as part of that study: Patty's Market and the northern portion, Hell's Kitchen, from West 43rd Street up to around West 52nd Streets, from west of 8th Avenue all the way over to parts of near 11th. It was very comprehensive. It was very full, and everything was submitted to LPC. JD and I went down and did a presentation back in 2019 of that report. And in essence, the entire thing was ignored. But more important, the political commitment to do serious due diligence and to establish an historic district, not the boundaries, was ignored. So I will say from our West Side community, it depends upon where you are in this city if you get treated equally. There's a small building in Brooklyn that was landmarked in a period of like 2 months, 3 months, and then the city acquired it for $3.6 million. There is not a lot of attention paid to our district. We need to go back to our council member and get it engaged with the mayor's office on this, because I sat in the city council hearing room where the head of EDC and our council member, the speaker, had a discussion back and forth about the commitments, and this was an agreement. So.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Before we get into how response, I know James wanted to bring up something. Before we get to that, I think Paul Devlin reminds us that the Irish word is actually Padraic, not
Patrick.
Sorry about that. James, thank you, James.
Padraic, how are you doing? Anyway, so I read the letter, and no matter how we may agree or disagree on whatever it should be called, I thought it was preposterous that they would deny that.
So there's no historic significance.
And I just wanted to add, yeah, and I think what seemed a little confusing to me is it sounded like, hey, let's go for a walk in Hell's Kitchen. I don't see any shopping carts. This must not be. I mean, it just sounded like they were looking for some sort of architectural or structural remnants, like they were going on an expedition, and because they didn't see anything, that it didn't matter. I really take issue with the lack of rationale as to why it was denied. And I would love a better explanation, because I don't think there is one, but I would love to hear if there's a better explanation.
James, the building landmarked in Brooklyn it was a house, and it has a 2-story addition store in front of it.
Well, you make my point.
Quite an alteration. And here they said we're not intact. That's a bunch of bullshit.
I totally agree. And I just want to, just as a footnote here, this isn't a landmark. It's not about the architectural unity. It's about the historic location. And the very fact that it's temporary weekly carts, that's what makes it historic. They were never meant to be permanently there, so you're never going to find evidence of that. That's all I have to say. It's preposterous.
I agree. We want to hear from everybody. My concern, the importance of those immigrant families that made this neighborhood and made this city seem to have been totally ignored. Dale, did you?
Yeah, I just had a question about the response. Was the response the same for both districts in terms of like level of intactness?
Yes.
That's kind of. I mean, I don't agree, but I recognize the thought process that led to them saying Patty's Market is not necessarily an intact historical structure, but it's hard to justify that in the largely residential district, which has a lot of intact specimen. I mean, yeah. So it's a tough.
Clinton Housing should be issuing the report for Patty's Market. More than 80% of the buildings are extant there.
Right. Dolores.
I don't know if we have budget left, but obviously the report was written up by Tony Robbins, who has expertise in this area, and did not know if perhaps there's an opportunity for an opinion to be written by him based off of his research. that may be helpful. You know, I don't know if it's something to explore.
I'm sorry, what are you suggesting?
Reaching out to seeing if we obviously paid for a consultant, Tony Robbins. I don't know if there's budget for it, but I thought maybe it would be helpful to get a reply or an analysis of that response by Tony Robbins. Again, don't know if there's budget to ask for him to consult, but I think that that may be helpful as a consistent voice, having done that research. So
sure.
We should ask Jessica, right? We should ask Jessica.
Some guidance or some advice how to respond. Good point. Yes, Paul.
Within that letter that we got in the Dropbox, there was language that there's pockets from 44th to 47th Street that would take further consideration. Would there be any sense to a strategy of determining a Hell's Kitchen historic district in a smaller boundary and then working later to enlarge it? So let's take—
I don't think we should negotiate against ourselves to begin with.
I mean, I hear your point, Joe, that like we had an agreement to do a large area, but what they're saying here is that there are components. So maybe take that as a springboard to get into a larger section.
That might be a great strategy, but just backing up a second, I'm wondering what our response should be to LPC now.
Preposterous. I think the word preposterous was there.
So I would ask Joe, I would ask Bob Benfato, how does a committee board respond to a negative letter from LPC? Is there recourse to object, to reconsider?
Of course.
Oh, there is.
In JD, this is not about a designation. There was a political commitment, and the example I will use is the South Village by the Greenwich Village Historical Society that dogged that for years, and then as part of a specific rezoning, the speaker, our council member Corey Johnson, got a commitment to actually move ahead and designate the South Village as part of the as an historic district. This is a matter of political will. Gail Brewer has a historic district on the Upper West Side, on Amsterdam and Columbus, that are tenements. And those tenements look exactly like the tenements here on 9th Avenue and 10th Avenue.
Sure.
Right. I just remember when we were going through the whole Garment District rezoning, and that was like one of the only gets that we got out of that, you know? Yeah. And so even though we didn't protect manufacturing like we were hoping to, or whatever, that was the big get. We were going to get a historic district, and it was very exciting. We got the allocation of funds. So I know we have to respond to LPC. I don't think that's a part of the response to LPC, but perhaps our council member will recall that we had that commitment to get that. And we really need to kind of ask them to honor that agreement, you know, and honor that political will that was being bestowed upon us. So I'd like to see that followed up on.
Okay, Brian. Dolores?
So I propose that we do write a letter saying that we're disappointed and we disagree with the result. I think that as part of the letter, if we can, try to see if we can get Tony Robbins' professional opinion or just to opine on the ruling. I think that we have to mention that this was a commitment and we need to document that this was part of that garment redistricting and bring in all those points that we had before. So essentially expressing not just disappointment, but a complete disagreement with of the finding. And
okay,
that we'd like to continue to pursue as a community based on whatever bullet points maybe we can get from Tony, and also noting that we had a political commitment.
Thank you, Dolores.
Second.
Is that a motion? Do we have a second on that?
Second.
I second that Dolores writes that letter.
No.
So how about a discussion about this letter? It has to be very carefully worded and written letter about both the denial of the Patrick's Market and the shrinking of the Hell's Kitchen historic district.
I think Bob and I should work on this because we went through this before with the garment center stuff, if possible.
Okay.
Is that all right, Bob?
Yeah, I'll do it first, Greg. Consent to.
Okay, about both districts. And certainly, secondly,
Yes, both districts.
we want to try to get some political, some of our electeds behind us on this. We want to
Maybe we'll move Hell's Kitchen to Brooklyn. That might be the trick. Just saying.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So all in favor of this, the proposal by Dolores to do this, great idea, great work. I want to thank Janine for getting us through this meeting and doing all those slides so well. And Savannah for all that hard work that you and Joe did on this. Good work, and good luck to Paul on writing the letter from your committee.
There'll be a lot of cut and paste,
And I didn't see all the chat remarks. For some reason, they didn't come up on my screen. So if there's anybody that we left out, I apologize. But
I want to thank Dolores and Joe for intervening. For some reason, most of those chat comments were directed at me. I do not know why, but
we do not allow people to make comments about board members talking in the chat. That's just not the way. It wouldn't happen in real life, you know?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I did not see any of those.
Well, I didn't realize that they were coming into me until I started getting texts from people saying, "What the hell is going on?" So
That person seemed like they were drunk or stoned too, by the way.
I say we leave it at that and motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Second.
thank you.